Assalamualaikum and greetings to Dr. Rosma Iza and my fellow friends. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Shazrin Aiman bin Khairul Azani. My matrix number is 2020834122 and I'm from KBA 25058. This is my video for the public speaking assignment for the public finance subject, which is ECO648. So today, for my speech, it will be related to the taxation topic. And the title of my speech is GST versus SST, which is better to be implemented. Before we go any deeper in the topic, let's see today's online news articles. First, we have articles from the Star on 5th January 2023. It said that reintroduced GST in budget 2023 as lifeline for countries that dilemma. And this statement came from the Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers, which is FMM. They has called the new government to reintroduce the Goods and Services Tax, the GST, in the upcoming budget 2023 in order to stronger the economic revival. Second article is from the New Straits Times on 1st January 2023. In the news, it stated that some members of the parliament, the MPs, that previously opposed the GST are now supporting the reintroduction of this tax regime. And even a third article from the Star on 19th January 2023 said that GST will be a step in the right direction. And this statement came from the Bank Islam chief economist Firdaus Rosli that even added that there was no right timing when it came to the implementing the consumption-based tax system. So, based on these articles, we can see that many parties urge the new government to reintroduce the GST back. And for the government, they can choose whether to follow it or not to follow it. Based on the recent response of the government is tend to relook and discuss it for the budget 2023. And if not, they will do so in 2024. However, the question here is, why GST? And the existing tax system, which is the SST, is not good enough. Also, what it means by reintroduce. Okay, so now I will share to you guys some information regarding both tax system. The first one is SST, that refers to Sales and Service Tax. The SST comprises of two elements, which is sales tax, a single stage tax imposed on products manufactured and produced locally, and on taxable goods imported into Malaysia. Second one, service tax, a consumption tax imposed on taxable services provided in Malaysia by a registered service provider carrying out their business. Meanwhile, the second tax system is GST, which refers to Goods and Services Tax. SST is paid by the consumer, but it is remitted to the government by the business that selling the goods and services. So, SST was first being implemented by Malaysia in 1970s and have been gone through several improvements from time to time. Since then, Malaysia uses this tax system until the year of 2015, which at that time, Malaysia switched from SST to GST. So, GST replaced the SST in 2015. However, after the 2018 election, while GST decreased to 0% rate, the government have also announced that Sales and Services Tax SST will be officially implemented back in the September 2018. So, GST only lasts for 3 years after being replaced back to the SST. Today, in 2023, GST nowadays is being mentioned frequently. Many say that it is the best best action for the government to take in order to facing the global economy crisis and also to deal with the national debt dilemma. Now, let me share some characteristics of SST and GST, and also we will comparing them together. First characteristic is the type of tax system. Okay, we start with the SST. SST is a single stage tax system, which means only the service industry and manufacturers are the ones that need to pay SST when selling products to the dealers. Service tax are also levied only on consumers who use tax services. Then SST has only one phase to pay taxes. On the other hand, GST is the multi-stage tax system which involve most business and industries including manufacturers, distributors, retailers, and also consumers. GST covers a wide range of targets from manufacturers um, selling products to dealers, reselling them to retailers, and then reselling them to consumer at every stage. From here, GST seems to be better since it being implemented to every single stage in the product supply chain. However, in consumer perspective, SST is better since not all stages will be charged with tax. Thus, the final price for product or service will be lower compared to GST. That's why people uh, not prefer GST. Plus, the consumer will be charged for the service only when we implemented the SST. So now we move to the second characteristic, which is the tax rate charge. Okay. Now for the SST, rate will be between 5% and 10%. And there may also be a specific tax rate depending on the government, plus a 6% service tax. As for the GST, specifically in Malaysia, during the implementation in the 2015, it is fixed with 6% tax and is not considered as costing, no service, and surtax on goods. Okay, this means each layer of supply chain uh, from the supplier, the manufacturer, the retailer to the customers must pay 6% GST in addition to other charges. Um, GST looks better here since it involves all stages in supply chain. However, it forced businesses to increase their rates, which explain the high cost of product during the implementation of GST in the 2015. Um, However, the paid input tax can be claimed back by the business later. So the business doesn't have to set the rate for their product to over, and even the weaknesses that GST had can be overcome by decreasing the GST rate to a lower and reasonable rate, maybe 4%, like what the FMM stated in the article. Next characteristic is transparency. Okay, SST tend to be said as lower transparency as SST rates varied from 6% to 10%. Some importers, manufacturers, wholesalers, or retailers fail to declare their taxes through transfer pricing. As for GST, it has the higher transparency than SST as the GST standard rates fixed at 6%. GST able to curb transparency, misappropriation, and tax payment issues. Um, from this, GST look fair and equitable since every party will be charged with the same tax rate. GST will also help reduce the tax erosion and leakage. That's why it is said GST is been said to be more transparency than the SST. So now we have come to the last characteristic, and the last characteristic is the classification of issue. Uh, uh, SST, the SST tend to have issue of classification since it separated the sales and the service component. Moreover, both components have different rate, which is for the sales rate, uh, for the sales, it from 6 to 10%, and service with 6%. Even for sales component and services component, the classification is assorted, and each classification has different rate set. And this may lead to overlapping classification. On the GST side, it has minimal classification issue since all goods and services are having 6% tax rate. Again, GST seems to be better in classification than the SST. So those are the characteristics then that I can provide here, and we have also comparing them. Okay, so from what you can see overall from a glance, we can say that GST is better to be implemented than the SST. We all can agree that GST is better. Um, it's a better taxation system. But the most important thing is we must make sure that the implementation of the GST itself will be done correctly and honestly by the government in order to obtain the advantages at its fullest. But from the good side of the GST, this doesn't mean that SST is bad, since SST implementation in Malaysia has brought Malaysia to become one of the best developing countries in handling economic affairs and issues. And even SST is always getting improved from time to time, which repairing its weaknesses and strengthen its strengths. SST still can be continued, but in terms of effectiveness, even if we set a higher rate for the SST, it will have to be set almost double from the original rate, which with 16% in order to match the GST revenue collection. So from here, we can see that government should implement the GST as we want the best taxation system for the country. Consumers still tend to think that the ones that make the price of good and service become lower is the best, which they think that SST is better than GST. But lastly, it always finally comes to a few questions that they will have when it comes to whether the prices of goods will drop or increase. First one is how many levels are there in the product supply chain between the manufacturer and the consumer. Second one is different product and services are affected differently. For example, renewable cars, mobile phones, and also food items and groceries. The third one is prevailing tax exemption for businesses. Replacing SST with GST is expected to generate more income for the government. The GST can be beneficial as it simplifies taxation, reducing the several different taxes into one straightforward system. It is thought to cut down on tax avoidance among the businesses and reduce the corruption, which is that's the main purpose of GST. Malaysian can expect prices to adjust differently based on the type of good and services, and that there is no actual certainty or predicted outcome that can be expected from this change. The only thing to do is to wait and see just the kind of rates that our government will set for the GST will if the GST will be implemented in the country later in the future, and then we can see what items will or will not be affected. You can expect opportunities for non-compliance and profiteering to exist during the period of the changes tax system. So no matter what and which tax system that Malaysia will be having, it surely have been decided precisely and deeply by the government for the country's sakes. And that's the end of my speech. Thank you for lending your ears for listen to me. Okay, I hope that you can get something from my speech, from my talk, and I bid you a farewell and goodbye. And also, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.